Well, have you ever been locked out? Have you ever been shut out of something or locked out of something? I think we've all had that experience, haven't we? I remember a number of years ago, my family and I, we were living in Calgary, and I had taken my kids out for the day. It was summer vacation, and Britton was at work, and I was taking the kids out for an adventure, and we had come home, pulled up into the driveway, got out of the car. I was holding a whole bunch of things. We stepped up onto the stoop, and I kind of fumbled with my keys as I reached for the deadbolt, and the keys fell out of my hand towards the stoop. Now, our house in Calgary, it had a cement stoop that was attached to the house with rebar. And over the years that the house had been around, it was built in the early 80s, and as it had been around, it had developed this little crack or this little space between the cement stoop and the foundation of the house. It wasn't that big. It was very safe. I mean, we wouldn't trip over it or fall into it, but it was just the right size that when I dropped my keys, that my keys would fall into the crack and down to the ground below. My keys, I dropped to my knees and tried to get down and reach my hand down there, but it was too small. I could not see my keys. I could not reach my keys. And so there I am with 3 kids standing on the door of our house, and the door is locked. We wanted to come home and have something to eat. We wanted to come home and relax and refresh, but we couldn't get in the house. We were locked out. Have you ever been locked out of your house? Or maybe you've been locked out of your car and you had to wait for CAA to come and help you get into your car. Maybe you've been locked out of your office, or maybe there was a cabinet that you tried to get in and you couldn't find the key to that cabinet and you've been locked out of someplace. You know, this happens. I think we've all experienced it at one time or another. Sometimes it's literally we're locked out. Sometimes it's figuratively we're locked out. You know, maybe it's a matter that a coworker is closing the door on a partnership or a project that we're supposed to work with them on, but they keep closing the door and shutting us out of it. Or maybe, you know, you've graduated this spring and you're trying to find a job in your chosen field that you've been studying so hard to, but it seems like the doors are closed in this COVID-19 world. Or maybe there's a relationship that you're experiencing trouble in, and it feels like the doors to that relationship are closed, maybe hammered shut, maybe deadbolted, and you feel like there's no hope there. Or maybe you've got a diagnosis of health, and it feels like the doors to healthcare are just closed right now, and you can't get any help in the midst of this. You know, I think we've all experienced closed doors in our life. We've all felt that at one time or another, and if you're feeling that right now, friend, here's what I want you to know. There's hope. There's good news today, because there is an open door waiting for you today if you will go through it. You know, we've been looking at this series that we've called Praxis over the last number of weeks. And this series is looking at 7 messages that Jesus spoke to 7 churches in the region of the world we know as Turkey today. And each message, Jesus breathes hope into the church. Sometimes they're corrective messages that kind of say, you know what, you need to change this. But today, the message that we're going to look at today is just a message of hope. It's a message of help, and it's a message of purpose. You know, I think this message that we're going to look at today to the church at Philadelphia, that Jesus was really happy to write this letter, because in it, he just expresses his love, and he expresses how much he wants to help the people who feel like doors are closed to them. And that's the same message that he has for you today, because in each of these messages that Jesus gives, he says this same phrase over and over again. It's in verse 13 of the passage we're going to look at today. He says, whoever has ears to hear, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And when Jesus says this, you know what he's saying? He's saying, hey, you, listen up, because, hey, do you have ears? I'm guessing everybody that's listening or everybody that's watching this today has a set of ears. Even if there's a hearing aid in it, you still have ears. And Jesus says, hey, you with ears, listen to what I have to say. And Jesus has something he wants to speak to you today. And he starts off the message and he says to the church in Philadelphia, he says this, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. You know, Jesus begins every single one of the messages kind of the same way. He begins by talking about himself, by describing who he is. And sometimes it's a great image of a sword, or it's a great image of, you know, him holding stars in his hand, but in this one, he describes himself in a specific way. He describes himself as faithful and true, and he describes himself as holding the key of David. And Jesus intentionally begins each of these letters by describing who he is because you know what? When we feel like doors are shut to us, when we feel like everything is against us, what we need in that moment is a grander vision of Jesus. Whatever you're facing today, friend, I want you to know that you just need a grander vision of Jesus, that this is the starting point of everything that we need, that if we would understand the greatness, the grandness of who Jesus is, that this would make a difference in our life, and it would begin to open the door to something new for us to experience. You see, our problem is that we have too low a view of Jesus. We don't believe that Jesus can actually satisfy, that Jesus can actually do anything in our world, that he can actually solve the problems of this world. And we need a grander vision of him in order to solve the problems of this world. Because if we would see Jesus for who he really is, it would change the way that we respond to him. It would change the way that we react in the world around us. And Jesus says that he is the one who holds the key of David, that he is the one who is holy and true. And these titles, both of these titles are Messianic titles. And if you haven't gone to church for a while, if maybe this is your first Sunday, I mean, you probably don't understand what I mean by the word Messianic, and so let me explain what that is. It's talking about the Messiah. And these two descriptions are titles that the Messiah has. The Messiah, for those who haven't gone to church, that this is the hero of the Bible. That's what the Messiah really is. It means anointed one. That's what it literally translates as. But really, what you need to understand about the Messiah is that he is the hero of the narrative of Scripture. You see, what happens in Scripture, it starts out at the beginning, and it says that, you know what, sin enters the world. Sin is this thing that corrupts everything that it touches. And sin enters this world, and it enters into humanity, and it corrupts the world, all of creation. It corrupts you and me. And sin is something that has been passed down generation from generation to generation. No one has to teach us to do it. It's just part of who we are. And there is nothing that we can do to stop sinning. It has corrupted us so much that there is no amount of good works that we can do to make it right what we have done. Doesn't matter what you have done. There's no amount that you can do of good works to save yourself. Enter the Messiah, Jesus Christ, the one who is the Son of God, who, like us, is human, but who is also God. I don't understand how this works, but these two natures are one. And he is fully human and fully God, and because of that, he's able to live a life of perfection, a life of sinlessness. And because of that, he's able to give his life so that you and I could be reconciled with God. You see, sin corrupts everything that it touches. It corrupts the relationship between you and your best friend. It corrupts relationship between you and your parents. It corrupts relationship between you and God. Sin destroys everything it touches, but the Messiah has come to set all that is broken right. And Jesus begins by saying, I'm the Messiah. I'm the hero of this story. There is nothing that I cannot fix. There is nothing that I cannot restore. And you see, Jesus wants you to know something, that even though it feels like everything is broken around you, that the world doesn't work anymore, and we've seen that on TV, haven't we? We've seen that in the world around us, as we see systemic problems all around us. And Jesus wants you to know that he holds the key of David, that he is the one who is holy and true, that he is the hero of the story. And if we would have a grander vision of who Jesus is, we would begin to see that there is help. You see, friends, even though it may feel like the door is closed today on everything that is broken in the world and there is no way to fix it, here's what I want you to know, that Jesus has an open door for you. And this open door leads to help. This is what Jesus wants to know for the church in Philadelphia. See, the church in Philadelphia is going through some hard times. He says to them, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. I know your deeds. See, friends, Jesus sees you. He loves to say this, I know your deeds. And what Jesus is saying, he says, right where you are right now, I see you. I see everything that you've done, both the good and the bad. I see you for who you are. And the good news today is that Jesus meets you right where you are. You see, you don't have to get cleaned up to go and see him. You know, I remember going to Grandma's house, right? And Mom, I'd come in after playing, and Mom would say, okay, get cleaned up. We're going to Grandma's house. And it was like, why do I have to clean up to go to Grandma's house, right? But that's what you did, because you put on the good clothes. You looked nice. You washed up. But see, with Jesus, you don't have to wash up. You come as you are. The mess that you are, or the goodness that you are. And Jesus meets you exactly where you are. He says, I know your deeds, and I want to help. Jesus says, I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I know your deeds. See, the church in Philadelphia, I mean, this was a church that was doing well. They were faithful and loyal to Jesus. And because of that, they were struggling. We read in a couple of verses that there was a group of people who were actually slandering the church in Philadelphia, that they were spreading lies about them, that they were telling them that you aren't really loved by God. And this group that was part of the Jewish synagogue was making life difficult. In fact, they were shutting them out of the synagogue. And here's what you need to understand, is that for a Jew, which was predominantly what the church started as, was a group of Jews, and then they began to embrace Gentiles. But to those Jews, when they first came to know Christ, they began to get shut out of synagogues. And there was a door that was shut to them, and they couldn't get in. Because the Jews who didn't believe in Jesus said, you are no longer part of us. And the synagogue was the center of community for a Jewish person. It was where you went to have friends, to have fellowship. It was where you made connections. It was the center of life. It was also where you learned about God. But because of their faith in Jesus, that door was shut to them, and they couldn't get in. Not only that, but the people who had once been friends were now going to the Roman authorities and telling them that, hey, those people, they aren't really part of us. And where we have an exception as Jews not to worship Caesar, these are not Jews. These Christians are not Jews, and so they should not get an exemption. And so the Roman authorities were looking at the Christians who were shut out of the synagogues, being told that they weren't Jews, and now they're being forced now to worship Caesar, to declare that Caesar is Lord, but to a Christian, only Jesus is Lord. And so the church in Philadelphia is under constant pressure from people who used to be their friends, who closed the door on them. But not only that, even their income was threatened, because the trade guilds in Philadelphia and the region really controlled the commerce that was going on there. And as we've said in previous weeks, to be a part of the trade guild, you had to worship the God of the trade guild. There was a patron deity that you had to worship. But Christians could only worship one God. They believed in one God, eternally existing in three persons, Father, Son, and Spirit. And you only worshiped this one God. But the world around them said you could worship as many gods as you wanted. In fact, you did that in order to have prosperity in many different areas of your life. And so this church was under constant pressure, and yet the church was staying faithful to Jesus. And Jesus says, I know you have little strength left. It's like there's a rock that's crushing them. And Jesus says, but see, I have opened a door. All these other doors have closed to you, but see, there is an open door. It's not that Jesus is going to open a door. It's that he's already got a door open. And they just need to look for it. Here's the interesting thing, though. You know, this door that Jesus talks about opening, it's not an escape hatch. You know, I think in life, when things are hard, often we want an escape hatch, don't we? It's like, Jesus, please take this from me. Jesus, help me get out of this thing. But Jesus says to the church in Philadelphia, see, I've opened a door before you. He doesn't say it's going to stop. Actually, he says it's going to continue. He says, yeah, there'll be some things that you kind of miss or avoid along the journey, but Jesus never says that the persecution that they are experiencing will stop. Instead, he says, I will make a way through it. And too often in life, we are looking for escape hatches when Jesus opens a door for us to move through it. And he offers us help in the midst of that persecution because he has something for us to experience. He says to the church in Philippi, I'm coming soon. You see, when we go through the door that Jesus opens for us, we find his presence. And we may find ourselves still in difficulty, but we find ourselves in challenging situations and difficult situations surrounded by the presence of Jesus. And this makes all the difference because he's the hero of the story. He's the one we're looking for. But too often, we go around pounding on doors, trying to get it open, trying to save ourselves, When Jesus says, I am the key of David. I am the key to the door that you really are looking for. You see, Jesus has opened a door, and it's a door that leads to help. But he's also opened a door that leads to hope. He says to this church that is under constant pressure from people who they used to call friends, who they used to call comrade in the synagogue. And he says, the people that are persecuting you, that here's what I'm going to make happen is they're going to fall down at your feet and they are going to admit that they were wrong. They're going to fall down at your feet and they're going to admit that you are the people of God. And he says, and some other trouble is going to come to Philadelphia, but you're not going to go through that. He doesn't say there's not going to be any trouble. He says, but this peace you won't have to go through. Jesus never promises that life will be easy. You know, there is a lie that is out there in the world that follow Jesus and everything will be prosperous and glorious and beautiful. That you will have riches and wealth and success. And it's a lie. You see, Jesus said to his disciples, he said, in this world you will have trouble. That was what he promised. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, for I am with you. You see, everything that we want is found in Jesus. And while we may go through difficulty, Jesus has promised his presence, and he is the hero of the story, the Messiah, the one who is holy and true, the one who holds the keys of David. And there is an open door waiting for you. It may not lead where you expect. It may not lead to prosperity and success, but it'll lead you deep into the heart and to the presence of Jesus. This is what he promises to his disciples. It's what he promises to us. It's what he promises to the church in Philadelphia. That if they will find the door that he has opened, they will find hope for tomorrow. And you know, right now, I was sitting backstage and I was thinking about all the hope that has been lost this spring. You know, we watched this video of our grads, and I remember my grad. And I remember the fun that was there, and Daniel talked about how this wasn't the grad that anyone expected, and it's the grad that we have. You know, I did a wedding yesterday, and it wasn't the wedding that the bride and groom were expecting, but it's the wedding that they had. And there's been so much loss in this time, and friends, I want you to know that Jesus is present right now, and that there is an open door in the midst of the loss that you've experienced this spring. There is an open door in the midst of the racial tensions and chaos in the world. Jesus is offering hope for each and every one of us. There is an open door. Are you looking for it? Because it may not be the door that you expect. Jesus is opening a door of help. And Jesus is opening a door of hope. But it may not be quite what you expect. 10 years ago this spring, my family and I, we were living in Calgary, and Britton and I were getting ready to launch out on some plans and some dreams that we had been talking about and putting together. And then all of a sudden, it was like the doors to those dreams were closed and locked. People that we had trusted began slamming the door in our face, and it hurt. And, you know, I did what I kind of do, which is I try to fix things. I tried banging on that door, kicking that door open, busting it down, tried doing everything that I possibly could, and things just kept getting worse. And then finally, I stopped. And I noticed that Jesus was opening a door. It wasn't the door we expected. It wasn't the door we were looking for. It wasn't the door that we wanted, but it was a door that was open that he was leading us towards. And we went through it. And that door led us here to Living Hope. It wasn't what we expected. It wasn't what we planned. It wasn't what we dreamed. But it was exactly where Jesus wanted us to be. This is what Jesus does. When we let go of the things that we are holding on to the doorknob that we're trying to twist, trying to pry open, if we would just let it go and look for the door that he is opening, we discover the help we need. We discover the hope we need. But there's more. Jesus says to the church in Philadelphia, he says this, I'm coming soon. There's that promise of presence again that Jesus offers if we'll go through the door. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. The one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. He talks about pillars. And in Philadelphia, there were pillars all over the city. And on these pillars were written names of people who had lived in Philadelphia. And these were people who had advanced the Greek culture in Philadelphia. You see, Philadelphia was established to be this bastion of Greek culture. It was meant to be like a missionary sending organization for Greek culture. They were meant to be an example, to live the way the Greeks lived, and then everybody around them would look on them and say, I want to be Greek too. I want to do that. Let's be like Philadelphia. And so all of the people who had been Greek missionaries, people not spreading the gospel, but spreading the good news of the Greek culture, their names were written on columns in the city to remind the people of the city to be ambassadors for Greek culture. And that's what Jesus says. He says, you know what? I'm going to open a door, and it's a door to be on mission with me. It's a door that's going to lead to help, that's going to lead to hope, that's going to lead to a purpose that is greater than your own. Just as the people of Philadelphia were to model what Greek culture looks like, we are to model what kingdom culture looks like. And Jesus says, I will write your name on a pillar if you will hold true to me, if you will go through the open door with me. But here's the thing, he says, and they will never leave it. Jesus says, I'm going to write your name on a pillar in my temple, in the place where I live, and you will never leave it. And here's what you need to know about Philadelphia. It's kind of an interesting story because Philadelphia had been rocked by earthquakes for over 100 years. It had been destroyed at one point, rebuilt, so those columns that had names on it had to be rebuilt and restored. And these earthquakes were so common that people began to be afraid to be caught in Philadelphia after dark. Because why? Because they're asleep, right? Who wants to be caught in this place where there's earthquakes after dark because you just might die? And so what happened in Philadelphia is usually in a city, people would live within the walls of the city because the walls of the city provide protection from the enemy outside. But the people in Philadelphia actually started living outside the walls, where it was safe from earthquakes, where things wouldn't fall on their heads. They would travel into the city to do their business and commerce, to buy and to sell, and then at night they would go back out into the countryside where it was safe. And Jesus says, not only is he going to write your name on a pillar if you'll walk with him through the open door, but that he will be the sure foundation for your life. That you will never have to leave him. You'll never have to go looking somewhere else for the help, for the hope, for the purpose that you need. That's what Jesus promises to the church in Philadelphia and to us. That he is the sure foundation. And if we will go through the open door that he has made for us, that there is something greater waiting for you today. There's help, there's hope, there is purpose. Are you looking for that door? Or are you pounding on some other door because that's where you think you want to be? I wonder if right now Jesus has a door that's open and waiting for you. And if he has something greater waiting, if you just go through it. So how do we do this? How do we walk through or find these open doors that Jesus has for us? Well, let me give you two words that hopefully will stick with you this week. As you face pressure, as you face difficulties, as the doors that you're trying to go through are not opening for you. First word is stop. Stop. Stop trying to do it on your own. Maybe today you've heard about Jesus for the first time. And maybe today you need to just stop trying to save yourself and look for the open door that Jesus has already made, an open door that will reconcile you with God the Father. Stop and turn to Jesus. Or maybe you've been following Jesus for some time, but things aren't going well. You feel locked out, you feel shut out, and maybe you just need to stop. Stop what you're doing. Stop trying to find your own way. Stop trying to make your own way. And instead, turn to Jesus. Stop. Just stop what you're doing. Stop trying to be the hero of the story and instead seek. Seek Jesus. If you don't know Jesus, I want to encourage you right now just to seek Jesus. Just wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just stop and say, Jesus, I want to follow you. Jesus, I'm tired of doing it on my own. I want to follow you. That's all it takes to begin this journey of following Jesus, of going through that open door. Just stop right now and just put that in your own words and seek Jesus. Or maybe life is tough and you've been following Jesus for some time. You've been pounding on the door. You know, in that story I told you about 10 years ago, I just kept trying to do everything I possibly could to fix it. And then I finally just stopped. I said, Jesus, I can't do this on my own. I can't do this. And that's when I began to see the open door that he had. An open door to where Britton and I have experienced more of the presence of Jesus in our life than anywhere else. Jesus is waiting for you. Stop. Seek him. Stop. Seek him. Look for the open door that he has for you. Imagine what's waiting. You know, I think Jesus has an open door for all of us. You know, in the midst of COVID-19, in the midst of all of the unrest that's going on in our world today, I think that Jesus has a door that is already open. And that if all of us here who call Living Hope home would actually look for that door, that we would find the help that we need for today, the hope that this world needs, and we would discover the purpose that Jesus has put us here in this generation for. And I think it would make all the difference. I think it would make the difference in countless people's lives, and I think it would transform this world if you and I together would hold on to what we have and go through the door that Jesus has opened for us today. Will you do that? Will you step through the door that Jesus is opening? Let me pray for you. Jesus, thank you that you have a door that is open right now. And that all of the problems that we have, all the problems that we see in this world, we do not have the answer to. I just want to confess that, Jesus. I don't have the answer to it. I think that a lot of my friends are saying the same thing. They don't have the answers. And we need the Messiah. We need the hero of the story. And the good news, Jesus, that I want to recognize right now is that you have never left the story. That you have always been standing there with a door that is wide open to us. And that if we would just look to you, that we would find it. And so, Jesus, I pray for each one who is watching this, who are gathered here. And I just pray, open our eyes to see the door that is in front of us, to the help and the hope and the purpose that you have for us. We have ears to hear, and so we are listening. Give us eyes to see where you want us to walk. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.